Hey guys, this is Comic Uno, and today I'm doing Comic Uno's Best Comics of the Week, and this is the show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. We go least favorite to best pick of the week and everything in between, so let's get started. Of course, at the end of the video, we have the viewer's pick of the week, and you have a chance for one of your comments to be showcased on the show. Now, jumping in, we have 10 comics this week, and number 10 for me was Detective Comics issue 1047. Now, this is a book I dropped a little while ago, but because we were starting this new weekly arc and it seemed like it was going to be focused more on the Bat family, I wanted to check it out. Now, I will say I checked out one of the one-shots that already showed the prelude to this Arkham Tower thing, and it wasn't really garnering my interest, and I will say a very similar feeling for this issue was the over-explaininess of this tower, and it felt very peacemaker-ish. It felt very over-explainy, and I just didn't quite love that part of the story. I like the idea of them utilizing characters like Batwoman, though, characters that we don't get to see on a monthly basis, but I just don't think we got to see the interaction between the Bat family as much as I expected with this issue. It definitely focused more on the main plot, and I just don't know if it garnered enough interest for me to pick up more issues. I would have been more interested to see the characters interact with this moment a little bit more than they did, and had some more character moments in this issue. So I'm giving that 2 stars. The artwork was really good for the issue, though. I will say that continuously Detective Comics has had some really solid art teams. So moving on to number 9, which is Captain Marvel issue 35. This arc is something I was honestly looking forward to, but I feel like we really haven't seen the thing that was kind of promised on the poster, let's say. I thought it was going to be more about the relationship between Carol and the other Captain Marvel-esque characters, like Miss Marvel and Monica. I wanted to see more of their interactions. We do get to see those characters, but they're mostly like trapped, or Captain Marvel having to use other entities of herself to save them, and I thought it was going to be them working together more and actually getting to see those interactions, and I think that's something I was disappointed with in this issue. Those other characters are very off-screen and not really seen until the end of the issue, but the artwork I thought was really good for this one. I really like how strong the action sequences are. The colors are very vibrant. But just a little disappointed with the story for this. So I'm overall giving it 3 stars. Not a bad issue, just not exactly where my expectations were. So moving on to number 8, which is Elektra, Black, White, and Blood, issue 1. I normally don't get these anthology books, but I thought it was interesting that they utilize a character that wasn't Deadpool or Wolverine for this. A character that we don't even have an ongoing book for. So I don't want to call Elektra a B-list character, but for the sake of this, let's call her a B-list character. It's cool to see them focusing on a character like this that, again, doesn't always get the ongoing series or miniseries, and just having these anthologies. Story-wise, I thought it was a little bland. There weren't any stories that really jumped out at me, but the artwork for all of it I thought was really good. And obviously we talk about the red scale of it all. The Sin City look of it I thought really worked coloring-wise, but I just thought the pencils were really vibrant for a relatively more action-heavy storylines. Now, I don't know if it really convinced me to buy more of this series, but I'm glad I gave it a shot, and I'm glad that they're focusing on characters that normally don't get series in an anthology instead of just Deadpool and Wolverine. So giving that 3 stars, and that is number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Black Widow, issue 13, and this was a very different vibe. The coloring was very old school comics, I would say. I really enjoyed the look of this book, but it's mostly just an action issue. It's looking into Black Widow's past, and I'm sure this story is going to play a bigger part in the future, but right now I don't really have the puzzle piece to be like, ooh, that's really exciting, this character is doing that with Black Widow, but mostly it just seemed like a fight to me. I'm like, cool, I guess. I don't know much about this character, but I'm sure we will learn more about him as the time goes on. But I kind of wish this was like a later chapter, because again, I'm sure in the next issue they're going to explain more about this, but I wanted to already know this character well enough where I'm like, oh, that was exciting to see the past. But honestly, it's mostly just an action issue. It's just one long action sequence. But to have this really unique style of coloring, I thought really worked for this issue. So overall, giving that 3 stars, and then it's number 7. Moving on to number 6, which is the Crush and Lobo finale, issue 8 here. And I thought this kind of went with the motions. I still love Crush and Lobo. I like a lot of the dialogue. I enjoy that she kind of gets back together with her girlfriend. That's kind of left in the air, and we have some good moments between Lobo and Crush, but I feel like it's just going through the motions. It's them kind of teaming up, but still hating each other. In the end, you don't really know if she ends up with her girlfriend or not. And they even have a line where you're like, oh, you thought that all these emotions were going to be resolved? Well, think again. And I'm like, oh, I think that's what was missing in this issue for me. I wanted that big emotional moment and that big emotional conclusion that, for me, it made the issue kind of fall flat. Also, not knowing where Crush is going to be after. They kind of leave this very open-ended where you're like, okay, will we even see more Crush and Lobo after this? And I want to know exactly where her adventures will be, and I kind of just wish it closed the door a little bit more than it did here. So overall, giving Crush and Lobo 3 stars. Artwork is always really good for this one. I like the style of it, but it's just a little disappointed with the finale. Moving on to number 5, which is The Amazing Spider-Man issue 84. I feel like this is just a really good art week because, once again, I thought the artwork was really spectacular for this one. Pun totally intended. And so I enjoyed seeing that, and I think the art team in general has been really strong for these issues of Spider-Man. Now, story-wise, I think it was a little lacking here. I think it had potential because you do have Ben Reilly versus an ex-Spider-Man character like Dr. Octopus, and he even mentions Superior Spider-Man. But Ben Reilly as a main lead has not been doing it for me. I do not care about the Beyond Corporation, so when they really get into the nitty-gritty of that, it just kind of bores me. Even when Dr. Octopus is on the page, it just didn't flow well, the story, for me. I just don't think it's moving very much. So I just feel like it's a book kind of walking in place right now, and I think there was a lot of potential in this issue that wasn't exactly tapped into. So overall, I'm gonna give that 3 stars, and that is number 5. Moving on to number 4, which is Batman issue 119. And man, oh man, I've been really liking Williamson's voice on Batman, and his second issue does not disappoint. We get to see Batman and Lex Luthor interact here, and it's such an interesting dynamic where we find out Lex Luthor knows that Bruce Wayne is Batman, which makes you scratch your head of why Lex Luthor took so long to figure out that Superman and Clark Kent are the same person. But I always kind of go into it as the Jim Gordon type, where it's like, okay, Jim is always in denial. Lex is just being in denial that Clark Kent's the same person. Obviously, the world knows now, so maybe he figured it out in that regard as well, because he actually knew the identity of Superman now. But I thought it was an interesting twist. I like that he was able to figure it out, and it wasn't just Batman teaming up with Lex Luthor. It's also Bruce Wayne having to be in this equation. So I thought that was cool. And the Abyss stuff is building pretty well here as well, and it's just overall a solid issue, but I think Lex and Bruce really make it. And then, I normally don't love the secondary stories for these DC books, but it's Maps, it's Gotham Academy. I thought it was cool to see a character that we haven't really seen in a while, and maybe even tease this kind of Robin role for the future. And because it's in the flagship book, you have to think, like, will this actually play a bigger role in other Batman stories? Is it going to go past just this backup? And a lot of these backups have connected to larger stories like Clown Hunter and Ghostmaker. They've been progressing these newer characters from James Tynion's era of Batman. So I could only think they're not just telling us a map story. There has to be a reason to tell these map stories. So I just thought it was a really well-rounded issue. Artwork for the Batman book is so spectacular as well. I just love the visuals for this book, and it's just such a solid run thus far. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Superman Son of Kal-El, issue 6. Finally, we get to kind of the progression of Jay and John's relationship. I was a little worried that they'd put that on hold just because so much going on in Superman, but we do get to see little tidbits of them just being nervous around each other and figuring out what these new emotions are for each other. And I really like the moment between John and Damian, where Damian's like, oh, I can see that you like this guy. That's cool. And, like, you have my blessing. And I thought that was a really good moment. It was interesting that Lois doesn't know yet, and I hope that means that we will get a coming out moment between John John and Lois, and I think that's going to be really important. And I hope we get to see more coming out scenes, like maybe between John and Superman. I hope we get to see those moments and they don't just brush them by. The actual story with Jay's world, I think, was interesting to learn about. I don't know if that's the thing that's holding my attention the most. I do think it's a little explainy in this issue, but I enjoyed this. I thought it was a very solid issue and moved the plot along very well for the villain side of the story, but also the more emotional side of the story and more character-driven stuff. And I like this kind of teen vibe to it with the art style as well, because you have the Young Justice previous artist working on this. So overall, giving that 4 stars, and that is number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is Thor, issue 20. And this definitely moves the plot really well, but there's a lot of great character moments, especially between Odin and Thor, where you just get to see them really butting heads and their idea of what a king is and just their relationship in general just kind of crumbling at this moment. And now they're also trying to figure out who is the god of hammers. And you find out it's actually Thor's hammer themselves as an entity. And I'm like, oh, that's a really cool concept and an interesting way to kind of bend the mythology a bit. So I just thought it was a well-paced issue where you get those kind of gutsy character moments, but then the big reveal at the end as well. So just a well-balanced issue. So overall, giving that 4 stars. Got some gritty art style here. It's definitely one to pick up. Now, moving into number 1, a book that I love, and that is Dark Knights of Steel, issue 3. Artwork is so spectacular. I really, really love just how it really knocks it out of the park with the character moments, but really plays with this medieval world. But instead of going dark like most medieval worlds would do, it's very bright, this book, and dealing with a lot of dark themes, where we get to see Supergirl killing a lot of people for the sake of her dad dying. And she does find out that Black Lightning did kill her dad, so she kind of has a reason to do it. But there's a lot of tension for the war to come, or the war not to come. We just don't know what's going to happen between these kingdoms, but also between the Amazons and Supergirl, and especially Wonder Woman and Supergirl, because Supergirl kind of did a bad thing, you know, and Wonder Woman loves her, and she's like, oh, I don't think she actually did this, and they don't even have the moment to really discuss it, and she starts killing even more people, killing Black Lightning in this issue as well. So there's a lot of interesting stuff and a lot of conversations that are going to be needed, but we're also progressing other plots as well, as Batman trying to figure out his own self-discovery. And it seems like next issue we're going to have his origin story of how he's related to the House of El, and hopefully we get to see what that means for his future and his connection to Superman, because I feel like that's something that hasn't really been pushed since issue 2, or issue 1, honestly. We're only up to issue 3, but I feel like there's only been small moments of it where that hasn't been really the center stage. We've had a lot of other characters involved. So overall, I thought this was a pretty well-balanced issue. We get a lot of moving parts and a lot of exciting moments and a lot of good promise for future issues, and good foundation to tell even better stories for the future. So I'm going to give that 4 stars, and that is my pick of the week. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Let me know in the comments below what your favorite book of the week was. And last week's pick of the week was Robin issue 9. And here are some comments about that. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.